In this video, I'll be giving you an introduction to GitHub Actions and teaching you how to automate workflows. Specifically, I'll demonstrate how you can run automated tests on every single pull request, how to add branch protection, and how to insert environment variables and environment secrets into your workflows. I'll also be giving you some more tips and tricks related to GitHub Actions. Now, before we get into all of that, I do need to mention that this video is sponsored by Microsoft. I've teamed up with them for this video and to deliver a 45-minute webinar on May 9th as a part of the Developer Digital Meetup Tour. This webinar will go much more in depth on this topic and demonstrate automatic deployments. It will of course include a live Q&A session and in general go through some more advanced developer workflows and share with you some best practices. If you'd like to register for the webinar, then please go to aka.ms/techwithtim or click the link in the description. And with that said, let's get into the video and learn about GitHub Actions. So as we dive in here, let me just give you a quick primer on GitHub Actions and explain to you some of the core functionality of it. So essentially, GitHub Actions allows us to automatically run actions whenever some event occurs on our repository. Now, typically, this will be related to some kind of branch. So for example, maybe we push some code to a branch. Maybe we have a pull request that we've created. Those are kind of the two main examples, but there's all kinds of other triggers that you can set up where you can then run actions. So typically, you're going to be doing something like testing your code or deploying your code or building something, but you can also run automatic scripts that maybe are going to compile some files for you, that are going to move some code around. Maybe they clean up the code base or they close an issue. You can do all kinds of advanced stuff here, and this video is really just going to touch the surface of what's possible with GitHub Actions. So if I scroll down here, you can see that you can run any workflow on any GitHub event. You can share your workflows across different repositories, and you can set up environment variables and just specific environments in general for all of your workflows to run. So in this case, you can see that we can create matrix builds, which means that we can run, for example, all of our tests on different operating systems and make sure that they work across kind of this entire stack or this entire, these entire environments, sorry. We can run any language, we can choose the different type of containers, and GitHub is actually going to automatically spin up what's known as runners for us, which are free up to a certain amount of minutes per month. Alternatively, you can pay for like a premium GitHub account and get access to more minutes, or you can set up your own runners where you have your own external servers that are actually running all of this code. There's all kinds of stuff here, but what I usually use this for is automatically testing and making sure that I'm not going to put any code on my main branch or a production branch that is potentially broken or doesn't pass any tests. So very great tool, saves a ton of time, and let me start showing you how to set it up. All right, so the first thing we're going to do here to set up GitHub Actions is we are going to create a new GitHub repository. I'm going to do this obviously from the GitHub website. I'm just going to call this GitHub Actions Demo. Obviously, you'd be doing this on a real repository, but for this video and tutorial, I'll just do kind of a temporary one. For now, I'm not going to add a README file. I will not initialize the repository, and that's because I already have some sample code that I'll share with you that we're going to use to kind of set this up. So what we can do here is go through this, where we're going to just essentially create our repository and then push it up here. So I'm just going to copy this line because I actually have all of the other ones memorized, and I'm going to close this file, go to VS Code. Let me just quickly walk you through this project, and then we're going to upload this to GitHub, and I'll start explaining to you things like branch protection and actually running GitHub workflows. So here, what I have is a very simple Flask application. This is simply a Python web server. If I go to main here, you can see that I have just a very basic app where I am returning a backwards string, and then I have a root here in Flask, that's just going to access the environment variable mode. I'm just doing this so I can demonstrate to you how you actually get access to environment variables from GitHub workflows. Anyways, kind of a silly example, but you see we have some Flask roots here, a basic Flask website. We're loading our stuff from our .env file. And then if I go here, I have a test file that's just going to test the two roots that I have. Obviously, we could have an NPM project. We could have anything that we want. And what I'm going to show you here will kind of apply to all of those projects, just with a few different changes. Continuing, I have a gitignore file, so I'm just ignoring my env file. I have my README. In fact, yeah, I think that's fine. I can leave that here for now. And then I have requirements.txt, just so I can use that to install all of the requirements for this project for Python. Okay, so this is not yet a Git repository. So what I'm going to do is type git init in my terminal to initialize this. I'm going to run through the steps. I'm going to type git add dot. git commit -m. This can be our first commit. I'm going to change the name of the master branch to be main, which is now what is on GitHub. So I'm going to type git branch -m and then main. That is just going to change the name of the master branch to main. Okay, I've done that. Now I'm going to add my remote. So I'm going to say git remote add origin and then the URL to my GitHub repository. And now that I've done that, I can push my code to the main branch. So I'm going to type git push origin and then main. This should push everything up for me. So now if we go to GitHub and we refresh, you can see that we have our code. Okay, perfect. So now we have kind of our base code. The next thing we need to do is actually create some workflows. And ideally, what we want to have happen is anytime we try to make a change to this repository, we want to automatically run any of our tests. So in this case, I just have one single test. But if I had multiple, then I would set up the script to run all of my different tests and make sure that those are passing before I allow someone to merge their code into the main branch. All right, so how do we do this? Well, the first thing that we need to do here is we need to go to GitHub and we need to set up some branch protection rules. Now, essentially what this is going to let us do is make it so that no one is able to push directly to this main or master branch, and instead they have to create a pull request if they want to contribute. Now, this is typically good practice, especially if you're working with multiple people. You don't want to be able to accidentally push something to the main branch, which is always supposed to be clean and fully functioning. You want to first make sure you're passing all of the different tests. And then if that's the case, you usually want to have your pull request approved, and then you're able to actually merge it in. So any repository you've worked on that's some kind of public repository or has a bunch of people working on it, you've probably seen there's branch protection rules and all kinds of automatic tests and workflows that are going on, and that uses GitHub Actions. At least typically it uses that. Okay, so I'm going to go to settings here, and I'm going to go to my branches. Now, when I go to branches here, you can see that I can add a branch protection rule. So I'm going to do that. Now, for the branch name pattern, you can actually put a regular expression here that is going to match against any branch that you want. In this case, I'm just going to put main because I only want to run this on the main branch. But if you wanted any branch that started with main, then you could do the regex for that. Okay, continuing, now I can go through kind of all these options. There's a ton here, but first, yes, I'm going to require a pull request before merging, and I'm going to require approvals. Now, in this case, I'll just require one, but you can require up to 6 approvals from contributors of the code base before you're actually allowed to merge this in. So a few other options, you guys can read through these. In my case, once a pull request is approved, even if additional code is added to it, I'm going to allow someone to merge that in. Okay, next we have require status checks to pass before merging. So status checks are going to be our automated workflows, like automatically testing our code. In this case, yes, I want those to pass before I allow someone to merge. So I'm going to click this button. Now, if we go here, require branches to be up to date before merging. This ensures pull requests targeting a matching branch have been tested with the latest code. This setting will not take effect unless at least one status code or one status check is enabled. Yes, I'm going to check that button. And don't worry about this for right now. Once we add our workflows, then they will show up here. Okay, continuing, we have a few other options here. I don't care about any of these, and I want to make sure that I allow myself to bypass these settings because right now I'm just working as an individual, so no one is going to be able to actually approve my pull request, so I need to make sure I can kind of manually override that, even though in a real production environment, you would want someone to be approving your pull request before you merge it in. Okay, we also have required deployments to succeed before merging. We're not going to set up deployments here, but if you check out that seminar with Microsoft that I'm doing on May 9th, we're going to set up some automated deployments in that. All right, so now that we have selected these options, anyone that tries to push to our main branch that is not an administrator of this repository, it's not going to allow them to do that because this branch is protected. However, if I were to try to do this, since I do not have this setting checked here, it will allow me to push because I am an administrator. If I didn't want to allow that, then I could check this box, and then again, it would allow me, or it would not allow me, sorry, to bypass the above settings. Okay, so now that we've done that, we want to start writing a workflow and demonstrate what happens when we submit a pull request and try to kind of merge that onto the main branch. All right, so how do we create a workflow? Well, to do that, we're going to go to our code here. First, I'm just going to make sure I'm on the main branch, so git checkout main. Okay, very good. And let's clear. Now, to create a workflow, what you're going to do is create a folder in the root of your GitHub project here, repository called .github. Inside of the .github folder, you're going to create another folder here and you're going to call that workflows. Now you also have like deployments and other types of actions that you can put here. In this case, we're just going with a workflow. Now, the way you define a workflow is you put all of the syntax, triggers, commands, scripts you want to run inside of a YAML file, so .yml. To do that, we're going to create a new file here. You can name this whatever you want, but obviously you want to name it something that's meaningful. In this case, I'm going to call it Flask test and then .yml. Okay, now here is where I can start writing my workflow. Now, before I do that, there is a helpful extension here in VS Code called GitHub Actions. So I've already typed that in. And if I go here, I can install that extension, and it's going to give me a language server for GitHub Actions. And sorry, it just asked me to press allow here. I'm going to select that so that I can kind of connect this to GitHub, and this will actually let me view the status of any of my GitHub action runs. So I'm going to allow VS Code here. Okay, let me open up this URL, and let me just make sure all of this is good. I think we are good to go. All right. So now we have configured the GitHub Actions extension. And now that we have this, as I was saying, you're going to have some live autocomplete, and you're going to be able to view the status of any of the workflows that have run based on, say, a pull request you submitted or something along those lines. Okay, now that we have that, let's go into our YAML file and start defining a workflow. The first thing we're going to do is create a name. So I'm going to call this Flask app tests, and this is what you're going to see as kind of the description of the workflow when it's running. Next, we need to define what's known as a trigger, and this is when this workflow runs. So I'm going to type on, and then I'm going to type pull underscore request, and then make sure the indentation is here. By the way, it's important. I'm going to type branches, and then dash, and then main. So this is pretty obvious, but what this is specifying is that I'm going to run the workflow that I define below whenever a pull request is made on the main branch. Now, of course, you could also use push. You could use a bunch of other triggers. In fact, let me bring up some of the triggers and show you a few examples. All right, so in front of me, I've just brought up some documentation here. I'll link this in the description that explains to you a few of the different triggers that you can use. Now, there's more than a few. In fact, there's quite a lot. If you look on the right-hand side here, you can see we have stuff like adding a branch protection rule, check run, create, delete, deployment, fork, issues, label, milestone, project, pull request comment, etc. So you can essentially run this on pretty well any kind of GitHub action that occurs and kind of go as custom as you want. Obviously, I won't show you all of these. I'm just going to show you pull request, which is kind of the most common. Okay, so let's go back here. Now that we understand a few of the triggers, we have the trigger that we're going to run on the main branch. Next, we need to define the jobs that we're going to be running. So I'm going to type jobs here, and here we can specify a bunch of different jobs, but the job that we want to have in this case is going to be test. Okay, now that we've specified that we're going to have a test job, we need to specify where we are going to run this. So what I mean by that is what operating system. Now, as I said, GitHub automatically has different runners, and these are going to be Mac, Windows, and Linux operating systems, and you can specify to run on multiple of them at the same time, or you can just run on one. In our case, we'll just run on one. So I'm going to type runs on : and then this is going to be Ubuntu -latest. Of course, you could look up the different versions that are available and run on any specific operating system that you want. Next, we are going to specify a few defaults. Now, you don't have to do this, but I just want to show you. So notice that all of my code is inside of this app folder, at least the code that I want to run the test in. In that case, what I can do is define the working directory that I want to use while I'm running my different scripts, and that way it'll automatically kind of prepend that to my different paths. So I'm going to type defaults, run, so now I'm specifying defaults for the run command, and then I'm going to type working, like this, and then dash directory is equal to, and then I'm going to do ./app/, okay, referencing this folder right here. Okay, that's all I need for my defaults. Now that I have that, the next thing that I can define is the different versions that I want to use, for example, for running Python code. Now, you could do this with NPM as well, or really any type of code that you're running. But what you can specify is strategy, okay? If we spell strategy correctly, then matrix, okay? And then next, we're going to do Python-version. And what I can do is pass an array or a list here of the different Python versions that I want to run this code on. So in this case, I just want to run this on Python 3.8, but if I wanted to run on multiple Python versions, I could do something like 3.9, 3.10, whatever the specific subversion is, I can kind of select all of those. And since we have matrix here, that means we're going to run the same test or the same script on every single one of these versions. Same thing here. If I were to create an array and then specify the different operating systems I want it to run on, it would do the same. Okay, so after strategy, what we can do is we can use some environment variables. So if we want to use an environment variable, we can say env, and then we can specify the value of an environment variable. So I could do something, say like mode, and then I could make this equal to a string, maybe like dev. Alternatively, we could use an encrypted environment variable, which I'm going to show you in a second, which is known as a GitHub secret. For now, we'll just put dev here. We can specify any other variables we want inside of env, and they're going to be used throughout the steps that I define next. By the way, Microsoft has really good documentation on how to write all of these different workflows. You do not have to memorize what I'm doing here. I just want to kind of explain to you line by line so that it makes a little bit more sense rather than just reading all of the code at once. Okay, so next I'm going to have steps. Now, these are the steps that I want to use to actually run the workflow. So this is kind of the configuration. I've set everything up. I'm defining the runner. I'm defining the strategy, what Python versions that I want to run on. And then I have my environment variables. Next is, what do you actually want to do? What do you want to test? What do you want to deploy, etc. So the first thing that we need to use, and this is going to be on pretty much all of our deployments, is uses, and then we're going to type actions / and then checkout at, and then this is going to be v3. Now, this is kind of a pre-made script that's provided by GitHub that automatically sets up our running environment for us. I won't go through exactly what this does, but in pretty much all of your workflows, you're going to use this. It just sets up the environment automatically for you. And fortunately, for these workflows, we have a ton of different scripts that we can kind of bring in that are pre-written for us and that we access similarly to this. So we could use a GitHub URL to access them, or we can do kind of a certain string here like you would have an npm package, for example. Okay, so this is what we're saying. We're saying we're going to use this. So that's going to actually do something. It's going to set up some stuff for us. Next, we're going to specify the name. And what we want to do is we want to set up Python. So we're describing this step. Now, for this step, we're going to say this uses actions / setup - Python at, and then this time we're going to use version v4. Okay, now what this is going to do, as it kind of states here, is set up Python for us on whatever environment that we're using. On our Linux machine, we do already have Python installed, but this is automatically going to install the correct Python version for us. And the way it's going to do that is by using Python -version : and then we are going to specify a variable here. We do that with the $, and then 2 sets of curly braces. And we're going to type matrix dot and then Python -version. Okay, so this is going to provide all of the different versions that we specify here in the matrix whenever we're running the steps for every single one of the Python versions. Okay, so that's it for that step. Next, after we set up Python is all installed, we need to install our Python dependencies. Now, at this point, you would kind of change the script based on exactly what you're doing. In my case, I need to set up the dependencies and then run my test file. For you, you may have some additional steps as well. So I'm going to type -name, and then this is going to be install dependencies, if we could spell this correctly. Okay, let's go to our friend spell checker here. And then we're going to say that we want to run the following. Now, this is where we can kind of write our own command. So what I want to do is run 2 commands. So I'm going to put this pipe operator here, just specifying I can go down to the next line. I'm going to type Python -m pip install -- upgrade, and then pip. It's a good idea to upgrade your pip before you run the pip install command. And then after that, I'm going to type pip install -r and then // and then requirements.txt. And the reason I'm doing // is because my working directory is app. So I need to get out of that to the parent directory where my requirements.txt file is. Okay, now that I have that, I'm going to go to my next step. So I have installed the dependencies. I have kind of set up Python. And now I need to actually test my app code. So I'm going to say test app code. And then what I'm going to run here is the script, which is Python /main_test.py. Perfect. So that's going to actually run my test. And then if any of these tests fail, you're going to see that the, workflow will fail. and it will not allow me to actually merge my branch in. If these all pass, then it's assuming I have a review or an approval on my pull request, I will be able to merge in my new branch. Okay, so we'll just quickly recap this. We have the name of our workflow. We have what is actually happening, so kind of the trigger here. We have the different jobs. In this case, we want to run a test. We can specify multiple jobs. In this case, we're just doing one. We're specifying the operating system or environment we want to run on, our default working directory. Then this is all of the different Python versions we could be using. We could also have multiple things here. Like if we were setting up Python and NPM, we could have multiple kind of arrays of versions here. Then we have an environment variable we're declaring, which is mode. Later, I'll show you how to actually use a secret, which is encrypted. And then we have the steps that are actually going to happen in our workflow. Okay, so that's it. Make sure you put this in .github/workflows and then the name of your workflow. And if you had multiple workflows, you would just create another YAML file here. All right. Now that we've done that, let's commit this code. So I'm going to say git add dot git commit -m, and I'm going to say create like this a workflow. For now, I'm going to push this directly to the main branch just so that it gets added. Then I'm going to create a pull request making a change and show you what happens when the workflow fails or passes, etc. Okay, so we're going to type git push origin main. Again, we typically won't be allowed to do this, but since I'm an admin, I can. So I'm going to push this to the main branch. Okay, very good. And now if I go and have a look at my GitHub repository here, I'm going to refresh. You can see that we've created the workflow. We have GitHub/workflows, and then we have our YAML file here. Okay, now we actually want to see these actions running. So how do we do that? Well, we need to create a pull request because that's what the trigger is. So I'm going to go git, and in this case, I'm going to actually pull. So git pull origin main, just to make sure I'm up to date. Okay. Then I'm going to type git checkout -b, and I'm going to go with, let's just call this change. Okay, let's clear. Let's go and make a change to main.py. So maybe I'll just remove that comment, which shouldn't have actually been there. Okay, so that's a change. We'll type git add dot git commit -m remove comment, and then I'm going to type git push origin change. Okay, now we're pushing to GitHub. We'll go back here and we'll create a pull request. So let's do this. Remove comment, looks good to me. And now if we just wait a second, it should automatically run this workflow on our branch. So let's give it a second here and refresh. And notice that it started running this workflow. So let me go details here, and we can kind of watch the status of this once the runner is set up, which is automatically going to happen for us from GitHub. So it runs the checkout action, which sets up our environment. Now we're installing the dependencies. This was a very fast test, so we passed it. And now we would be able to actually create our, or actually merge our pull request in. Now, if you go here, test app code, you can see the output. We passed both of our tests pretty well instantly because they were very fast. And then if we go back here to our pull request, we get our little check mark, and we would be good to submit this. Awesome. Now, what we could do here is we could review our GitHub Actions by using the GitHub Action extension. Notice that we have a test that was ran. I can view the test, and then just like I was able to do on GitHub, I can view all of that directly from VS Code here and see all of the logs, kind of a helpful extension to look at. We also could manually trigger workflows. I'm not going to show you that right now, but you could do that from this extension. Okay. Now let's see what happens if we fail the test. So let's kind of just make something where we raise an exception. So let's just say raise exception like this. Okay. Now type git add dot git commit -m fail, and then git push origin change. Okay. Now when we go back here, it should run the workflow again. I think that's how we set it up in our settings. Okay. So let's give this a second. It's going to run again. Okay, so the test is finished. You can see that we failed this test right here. It says an exception occurred. Tells us where it failed, just like it would normally in any Python unit test. And then we would have to fix this, resubmit, and then we would be able to actually merge this in. Okay, so I'm actually going to close this pull request because I don't really need this. So I'm just going to go here and go close pull request. Okay, now we can go back, git checkout main, and I'm going to show you how we can use a GitHub secret. So oftentimes when you are running these kind of deployments, especially if you're testing on some kind of server, you have a more complex setup, you're going to have stuff like API keys or other secrets that you need access to. Now, you don't want to pluck them, for example, in a .env file, because if you do that, then you're going to need to actually submit that env file to GitHub, and then you'd be exposing that data. So it can be a little bit tricky to figure out, okay, how do I get an API key or other sensitive data as a part of my workflow? Well, the main way to do that is to use something known as GitHub secrets. So what I showed you in the workflow, by the way, here is just a standard environment variable. Like anyone can read this, anyone can view what it is. So you don't want to use that. Instead, what you want to use is what's known as an encrypted secret, which you can get access to by going to settings on your repository. Let me make this full screen. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to go to environments. And the first thing I need to do is set up an environment that I'm going to use for my workflows. So I'm going to go new environment. For now, I can just call this dev. And inside of here, what I can do is add a secret. I can also add protection rules, but we don't need to do that right now. So I'm going to go add secret, and this is just like an environment variable, except it's going to be encrypted by GitHub and only visible by the administrators of the repository. So in this case, one of my secrets would be mode. This is one of the environment variables we're using here in our code, and then the value could be something like dev. Although typically here you would put some kind of sensitive data like an API key or a password or something along those lines, and then you can see here that it's locked. You can edit it and view it as the administrator, but no one else will be able to do that. Okay, so now that we've created this, what's going to happen is every time we run our workflow, this is automatically going to be kind of applied and sent into the workflow. So we'll have access to it, and now I just need to show you how we actually use it. Well, to use it, we have to modify our workflow. So what I can do here is go to env, and now rather than setting the environment variable mode equal to dev, I'm going to set it equal to my GitHub secret. Now, I can't just use the GitHub secret normally. So for example, if I remove this, I'm not going to be able to access the GitHub secret in my Python file as an environment variable. Instead, I have to declare the environment variable name again and then make it equal to the secret value. The way you do this, though, is $, 2 braces, then you're going to type secret, dot, and then the name of the secret. In this case, it's simply mode. So that's going to access the GitHub secret mode for you. And just one thing to note here, if you try to say log the secret or view it, GitHub is actually automatically going to redact that data for you. So you're not going to be able to view the value of this secret in any kind of logs, which is the idea. You don't want to expose this. You want to keep it, well, secret. Okay, so I've modified this workflow now. I'm just going to push directly to main. So I'm going to type git add dot git commit -m add env var. Okay, git push origin main. All right, so that should now change the main branch. Now what I'm going to do is type git checkout -b, and we will just call this test. All right, and now what we can do is we can go to main, and I guess we can just make some change here. So let's just go comment, okay, git add dot git commit -m make change. I'm just doing this so we can make a pull request and make sure this works. Apologize for the cut there. I just had my cat running all over my keyboard, so I had to deal with that quickly. Anyways, now I'm going to push to my test branch. So git push origin test. Okay. And now if we go to GitHub and we refresh, oops, I was on the wrong branch there. Let's just go back. We should see that we can make a pull request. So let's go ahead and do that. Going to add our comment. Okay. And we just have one file changed. And now we'll just make sure that this workflow runs just to kind of prove that we can actually access that secret. Okay, looks like everything is all good. And now we would be able to merge this pull request in using that secret value. So with that said, I think I'm going to wrap up the video here. Hopefully this gave you a good introduction to using GitHub Actions and showed you some of the core functionality. Of course, there's all kinds of documentation like what I have in front of me here that shows you all kinds of stuff that you can do in terms of creating different jobs, workflows, triggers, etc. This can get fairly complicated and it would take many hours for me to cover this in a single video. However, if you want to learn more, then make sure you check out the webinar that I'm doing with Microsoft on May 9th, where we'll be talking about automatic deployments and going through some more advanced topics related to GitHub Actions. Now, in the meantime, I'll leave some links to documentation in the description in case you want to learn more. And keep in mind that if you're doing a fairly common task like testing or deploying, there's probably already a workflow out there written for you that you can copy, modify slightly, and then use in your own environment. With that said, I hope you enjoyed the video, and I look forward to seeing you in another one.